Hello everyone, welcome to the Friday afternoon live in this group. I am now doing these Q&A calls once a month where people can join me if they've done a workshop with me recently, or maybe they're doing a course with me at the moment, whether that's a training course or just a practicing course, whatever it might be. And we just get together and you can ask questions, follow-up questions, like, for example, oh, we did this and my body felt like the opposite and I'm curious, or why are we doing it that way and not that way that we're used to, or you said something and I didn't quite understand. And it's nice, we kind of come together and we can talk about it more when maybe during the class or during the workshop there wasn't always the time for this. And so a couple of weeks ago was the first one of those, and I loved all of the questions that people were asking, really amazing questions. And one of them was by a lady very specifically. So when I get you into the undoing pose, lying on the back, knees bent, feet on the floor, also called the constructive rest position, I think, she felt that the kind of bringing the feet a little bit closer in towards you so that they are aligned below the knees was causing some tension in her hips. So her perception of it was actually not as helpful as maybe placing the feet further away from the buttocks. And in fact, and she mentioned this, and I have also experienced this, that in some somatic teaching, we actually purposefully place the feet further away. And I remember being in a class once in Manchester, actually, that I thoroughly enjoyed. And we had the feet also purposefully further away. I don't recall, unfortunately, whether she said as to why. I remember obviously being a little bit like, oh, I don't know that. I'm not so used to that. I don't know about this. But I just went with it and it did something. So there was a point to it. So when I get you into certain positions, you might notice, those of you who practiced yoga with me before, is that I don't really prompt your alignment. I make some suggestions, but I'll go into that as to how and why. And from other yoga classes and in yoga, we take care of alignment, supposedly. And some styles of yoga, if you want to call it that, are very specific about their alignment, like aligning the heel with the inner edge of the foot, or this in parallel, this distance apart, turning, I don't know, all sorts of different things. This below that above this. And when you practice yoga with me, I hardly ever give those types of instructions. And I just want to go into a little bit as to why, and then maybe understanding, kind of how to work out the best alignment for you, because it's a very individualized, personal kind of process. So at the one of the main things that I would actually really love to put across and to nurture and to encourage in people during a practice is to become a lot more aware of sensation, to really stimulate our proprioception, to get a felt, truthful sense of how the body carries itself in relation to the ground and in space. Because all of that is dictated and pushed and pulled by all of our habitual holding patterns in the body, and our ability to actually distinguish between the different sensations in the body in the first place and to discriminate is being numbed down by those habitual holding patterns and just by all of the stories of life, all the dramas living in a concrete world, all of that. So that innate intelligence that we have to move and to learn from sensation has been completely numbed down over our lifetime and keeps getting numbed down with every day. normal life. Nothing dramatic even has to happen. So I think one of the great potentials within our yoga practice is to reignite that, to come back to that innate intelligence, to re-educate the body, because only when we're in that innate and natural relation, we might be able to actually resolve some of the aches and pains, postural issues, the way that we carry ourselves, and then ultimately actually the way that we relate to the world as well. And that also is related to our general health, because as a whole we are beings of relation. So it's a real neurological process that we're kind of stimulating there, that we are trying to tap into. And only this morning I was having a conversation with a private student of mine. So something that I've been observing and talking about already several times is that I'm very curious to see how this kind of level of confinement and isolation, and those kind of words are quite big at the moment, over such a long period of time, what impact that's going to have on our organs health and our tissue health, general health, because we are beings of expression, of interrelation, and that is being restricted at the moment and has been for a long time. And so I think there's going to be quite a long-term effect on that. And this morning during the class we were not actually talking about that, but we're talking about proprioception, and my student was saying that she's also really noticing more recently, with all of the kind of stress and everything going on and how her proprioception is being affected. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that also makes perfect sense, right? Because we're just not in our normal expression, in our normal interrelation with the world around us. So again, there's more kind of numbing down and losing some of that innate intelligence. And when we lose proprioception, that can lead to a whole bunch of things. So that can well be the route to potential sort of suffering of chronic pain. So that the pain actually continues even though the injury is already healed. It will cause in age, it will cause balancing issues, and it's really that, stiffness and loss of proprioception in elderly people, why they more easily fall over. It's not because they're kind of gone a bit stupid, because they lost their proprioception. So, it's actually a really important part of our nervous system that we need to keep stimulating, and that we need to keep alive and in relation. So the way, going now back, hopefully, trying to not go off too much on a tangent. So the way this relates to the prompting of alignment in yoga, I think is quite relevant and interesting. So maybe you've heard of the kind of top-down and bottom-up approach. So if I instruct you to place your feet in parallel 2 inches away from your sit bones, that's a top-down instruction. So you're going to have to measure that, align that, maybe even look at it, because you can't feel it, because I give you this kind of metric, not metric, but anyway, measurement, versus trying to give you an instruction that relates to the felt sense of the placement of the feet. Because why do I want to place my feet in a certain position? So this is what we need to figure out. If I want to have my feet further away for whatever reason, what am I trying to actually achieve with that? And I think in that particular class that I went to, for example, and I think in some somatic practices, that's something to do with reaching and tapping into the psoas muscle. Because I think it kind of, it will pull on it a little bit, I think. Versus my thinking, and so there's nothing wrong with it, because there's a purpose behind it. It's great. My thinking of bringing the feet relatively close in towards your bottom is a different one, and that is to feel supported through your structure and finding a way to be more restful and trusting with the earth. And that whole kind of trusting the earth for the support and being more restful through our structure is yet again another thing that's being numbed down as one of our innate proper relations and intelligence in our body. It's actually how we are meant to walk the earth, restfully, yielding, in relation, whereas we are being conditioned just from normal day-to-day life in a concrete world, plus all of the stories and dramas of life, to pull ourselves away and up and tight and together, which is all away from the earth. So what I'm trying to do with prompting things a little bit differently when it comes to the alignment and placement of hands, feet, whatever it is on the ground, is it's about re-educating our body and the nervous system in actually feeling the contact to the ground, feeling that relationship that we're meant to be in, being in a more effortless placement, in a more supported structure, the way that we are holding ourselves. So there's also a lot less effort required, and we put so much effort into everything all day long. So I'm just going to lie down and just kind of go through what my possible instructions would be, and I'm hoping that, if not all of them, but at least most of them, would really be a kind of talking to the body rather than talking to the head. So it would be a bottom up kind of prompting. If you wanted to just lie down, you don't need a yoga mat for this. I just put it down for the sake of whatever. But you could just lie down on the carpet if you wanted to, or you can watch me or just listen. It doesn't really matter. So sometimes I ask people to just kind of sort of come down and literally roll around a little bit, completely freestyle. And that's again just to get out of the headspace. Okay, I'm coming to my yoga mat, I'm meant to look like this, and that's just one other habit that's maybe not so useful. So rolling around makes us feel the ground, feels quite massagey, it feels, I get a sense of my body in space. So I'm tapping into this whole proprioception. I'm also checking in where my holding might be, if there's any kind of tension, if I can let things go quite free and floppy or not, if I'm controlling movement, I don't know. So there's a whole kind of bunch of things happening here. And then we can begin to place the feet down. And here's a couple of things that I would encourage and play with. So we don't want our feet too far away from us, but we don't want to create any tension in the ankles either. So whether it's, if I took a picture of it, or you can see it now, whether my feet in reality are somewhere below the knees or not, makes actually no difference. So just see if you can place your feet so they feel like they're somewhere below the knees to carry the weight of the legs. And then you can just give the weight of the legs vertically down through the feet, and they support you this way. And there's a couple of things that we can use as a little way of checking. So one is that I've placed my feet actually really quite wide apart, maybe a little bit un-yogic. So if we just all place the feet together for a moment, like literally bring the inner edges of the feet to touch, and the knees are together. And if I now pretended to fall asleep, what would happen with the legs? They would just kind of fall out to the side. So that means that if I have my feet quite close together, there is a contraction required here through my inner thighs and the hips to keep the knees upright. And I don't really want that. I don't want that unnecessary holding. So I'm just placing my feet wider, and I get a felt sense of the legs just being more secure. There is I'm bringing consciousness to the fact that I can actually just release here a little bit in those thighs and the inner hips. So, I'm actually going through the experience of it we could even play with it to sort of make the nervous system go, oh yeah, okay, that's what it's like. That's sort of unsupported, versus just feeling like the legs can rest. And then the other thing that you could imagine is that if you were to stand on a slippery surface, let's say we were standing on ice, and your feet are far away from you, and we could even place a foot far away and you might get a sense of it. Or if you were to wear a sock, or if you're on a slippery carpet or something, it even would work. But if you have the sense that if you were to stand on a slippery surface, the foot would just sort of go slide away, then it means that you're having to control the placement of the foot and the leg here. So you're still holding some tension here in the groin. So again, I can maybe bring the feet just to that place where that doesn't feel like it would happen. But instead, there is the possibility of the legs resting down through the feet. And it could be that we need to break down so many habitual patterns here, and how everybody kind of, we practice normally or think it was meant to look, or I don't know, whatever. Then we have to go through this very lengthy process of experimenting with it, of making our nervous system realize what it might feel like again and again and again and again, and remind the body of that felt experience, until eventually the body memory will actually, find a way to remember, this is where I can really let the legs rest into the feet. And so my hips can relax, that habitual holding pattern can relax, and I can give the pelvis away into the ground. I can allow a very easy, natural lumbar curve here. I can even relax the pelvic floor, I can soften the belly. All of this can just rest to the feet. And then, we can figure out a little bit whatever goes up, maybe around the shoulders, but this is just as a way of example. If I prompt people to bring the arms over the head behind you to the floor, that's not available to everyone's shoulders. So we can go through lots of different places to actually see what might be available. So maybe this is available. But then I also want to really take note of what that actually triggers in me, what kind of sensations. So there is a little bit of an opening here across the chest. There's a little bit of a pulling up through the ribs happening. So I'm bringing real awareness to that. But what it also does, it feels a little bit more exposed. So there is actually a little bit of a noise level kind of kicking in. It's not as quiet and safe and comfortable as with my arms down. But having said that, it's important that we begin to learn to distinguish and to discriminate. Is it really triggering me to an uncomfortable level, or is this actually okay? So we also need to start learning that, because bit by bit, of course, we want to maybe change the narrative of some of those stories that keep kind of dictating our life. So this is just an example of lying down. And if for whatever reason there is some story going on here for you in the hips, and for you it just feels freer and more supportive to have the feet a little bit further away, then maybe that's also a good place for you, and you work with that. And but each time we come here, you keep tuning into what the real sense of it is. That is kind of really, I think, what matters the most. And that's, to me, like one of the real fundamentals of our practice. So that's just by way of example. And that would go also for any other placement. If when I'm in a cat pose, or if I come up into downward facing dog, kind of just really trying to get that sense of how am I supporting myself through the structure so I can rest through the bones. Am I more on the pushy end, superhero yogi, or am I more on the lazy end and collapsing? Are my organs heavy and hanging down? How can I find more relationship in the way that I touch the ground, so that I'm in a more supported, helpful placement, and from here maybe movement can be much freer and more effortless, because I'm not having to fight and struggle with myself in the first place, if that makes sense. So again, why would I prompt this in any other way other than trying to get the real felt sense for where do I feel the most supported? So I don't want you to come to a straight line. I don't want you to be further forwards or further back or whatever. I want you to figure it out. And the same thing as we come into a downward facing dog. There's only one kind of thing that I would add, and something that you also noticed is that you might, in practicing with me, that I tend to have quite short placement, short distances. I like to work with shorter stances. And that is so that I can be a little bit more underneath me to be more restful and in direct communication with the ground. So if I go into a more classic kind of downward facing dog alignment, which would be with the hands further out, possibly. So it's a longer stance traditionally, right? So to begin with, I'm struggling to even rest into the hands. And I think this is where the pushy thing comes from, that I see a lot, that I need to actually come forwards first, then kind of push through the arms and then send myself back. And I haven't done this kind of downward dog for a long time, so it feels a bit odd. But, I'm being it feels really quite pulled. It feels definitely stretchy, which maybe some people are after. That's fine. But it doesn't feel very supported through my structure because I'm so far away from my center. So if I come into a shorter stance, then here already I've got an actual relationship and direction and ability to rest through my bones. And I can actually just come up. You see, I don't even need to go do all of that work through the arms. I can just keep resting through the arms and come up into my downward facing dog. And then maybe I find, okay, that's just gone a little bit too short or whatever, that's fine. But then I find my placement and my distance, and I feel a lot more supported through my bones, because they're just not, and it's not even that much of a difference. And it is a felt difference, like two different worlds, literally. In one, I'm comfortable. I can almost rest. I get the idea of using downward facing dog to rest for a moment. Whereas the other one was just like, okay, I'm going to have to hold on to this, otherwise I'm sliding away. And I remember this, one of my teachers once even said, that you should be so supported through your structure that you could do downward facing dog literally on ice, and you should not be like sliding away. And because this is a standard thing, right? Like the mat needs to be sticky, placing a towel on it, having sweaty hands and always kind of sliding away and all of this. So my teacher was quite serious about this when he said that. I was like, really, I'm not sure about that. I can do downward facing dog on ice, but I'm hearing him. It's like it makes sense, because then there is no bracing and none of that crazy effort. So I just wanted to talk to that a little bit, because it was one of the questions that came up. So kind of bottom line is that everybody's body is completely different. So I don't think set instructions for alignment in yoga actually make that much sense, for starters. Secondly, that just discourages all tuning into proprioception and true sensation of where we are in space and the way that we're holding ourselves, which is being lost anyway all day long on our lifelong journey, living in a concrete world, plus all of the stories. So that to me makes no sense. Therefore, I would rather find a way to speak to the body and to the body's innate intelligence and the way it relates to the world. and see if we can reignite that kind of ability to learn from our sensation, and then move with less effort, with less, what was the word I was using before? I thought that was quite a good word, can't remember now. Less having to kind of hold on for dear life, basically. So if you ever do a yoga pose and you're asked to hold it for, I don't know, however many breaths or this, that, but you feel like you're really having to cling on somehow, whether it's a standing posture or it doesn't really matter what posture it is, then, you know, that would be a good moment to respond to your sensation, because I don't think it's intended that way at all. You know, we should be able to actually feel the beauty and the poetry of every pose in the body, and that we can only do when we come back to our natural relationship with the earth and with the essence, really. So yeah, so I like that question, really good question. There were others, so maybe I'll pick some more as a topic for these talks. If you have any of these kind of questions, please ask them. I would love to hear from you. Comment. And also, if you guys are in any of my events at the moment, over the course of the last month, you will get an email from me at some point with a link to sign up to the next Q&A call. That always happens on the first Tuesday of every month in the evening for an hour, and you sort of submit your question in advance, and I can structure the call a little bit. And I've got a couple of workshops coming up, which, I don't know, I just thought I'd mention. One tomorrow, a popular workshop about using your breath, improving your resilience with breathing exercises. It's sort of a bit of theory, information about the nervous system, what actually happens in the nervous system when we're being triggered with a challenging experience, but how we can really work with the breath to regulate that, to come back to a healthier, more diaphragmatic way of breathing, and what, how that can help us break down some of the anxiety tension that we have in the body. That's a great workshop just for individuals who might find it helpful to have some of those tools basically in their toolbox, in their pocket, as a way of resourcing. But it's also a really great workshop for anyone who works with people, teachers, therapists, nurses, caretakers, anyone who works with other people, if you might be interested in that for helping with this kind of stuff for a friend or family member. And then you voted. The vote is in for the workshop on the 20th of March. And so just to say, obviously I put a vote in this group, but I also ran one on Instagram, and I ran one in like a Google survey thing on the newsletter. So I put all of the results together, and the winner is the Stillness Within. Very good choice. That's going to be a 2-hour yoga immersion workshop type. It will be a practice-based workshop on the 20th. So both of those are available now on my website under /workshops. So if you fancy it, it'd be lovely to see you. They are both on a pay what you can basis, which means you do have to put a €10 down payment down to sort of say, hey, yes, I'm committed, I'm coming. But after that, at the end of the workshop, you decide if and how much you want to pay more. That's then entirely up to you. It's also a really nice way of kind of paying forward, so that maybe you can pay more. That means you're allowing others to maybe pay less because they don't have the funds at the moment. And maybe one day in the future, you will be grateful for somebody else having paid forward, and you can pay less but still join a class. So yeah, check it out under /workshops on my website. Otherwise, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you again next week, I should think. Thank you so much. Take care. Love you all. Bye for now.